Hi, welcome to my channel, Reader Woman. My name is Judy, and I thought, since it is still March Mystery Madness, that I would have a little reading. And it's not only March Mystery Madness, but I had a brilliant idea. I was sleeping on it, and I decided that this was what I was going to do. And periodically I was going to have the Great Wodehouse Readathon. And just, I'm not going to read a whole story, but I have been reading on this book here because it's March Mystery, and this is a series, A Dozen Tales of Fiendish Cunning, Wodehouse on Crime. So we may know who did it at the beginning, but that doesn't mean there's not some suspense. So I thought I would choose out of this and we would read a little bit together. So, and of course, since I'm a Mr. Mulliner woman, we're going to start at The Angler's Rest. The Smile That Wins. The conversation in the bar parlor of the Angler's Rest had turned to the subject of the regrettably low standard of morality prevalent among the nobility and landed gentry of Great Britain. Oh my goodness. Miss Postlethwaite, our erudite barmaid, had brought the matter up by mentioning that in the novelette which she was reading, a viscount had just thrown a family solicitor over a cliff because he had found out his guilty secret, explained Miss Postlethwaite, polishing a glass a little severely, for she was a good woman. It was his guilty secret this solicitor had found out, so the Viscount threw him over the cliff. I suppose if one did but know, that sort of thing is going on all the time. Mr. Mulliner nodded gravely. Just so, he agreed. That, I believe, that whenever a family solicitor is found in 2 or more pieces at the bottom of a cliff, the first thing the Big Four at Scotland Yard do is make a roundup of all the viscounts in the neighborhood. Baronets are worse than viscounts, said a pint of stout vehemently. I was done down by one only last month over the sale of a cow. Earls are worse than baronets, insisted a whiskey sour. I could tell you something about earls. How about an OBE? Demanded a mild and bitter. If you ask me, OBEs want watching too. Mr. Mulliner sighed. The fact is, he said, reluctant though one may be to admit it, the entire British aristocracy is seamed and honeycombed with immorality. I venture to assert that if you took a pen and jabbed it down anywhere in the pages of Debrett's Peerage, you would find it piercing the name of someone who was going about the place with a conscience as tender as a sunburned neck. If anything were needed to prove my assertion, the story of my nephew, Adrian Mulliner, the detective, would do it. I didn't know you had a detective I didn't know you had a nephew who was a detective, said the whiskey sour. And now Mr. Mulliner begins. Oh yes, he has retired now, but at one time he was as keen an operator as anyone in the profession. After leaving Oxford and trying his hand at 1 or 2 uncongenial tasks, he had found his niche as a member of the firm of Widgery and Boone, investigators of Albemarle Street, and it was during his 2nd year with this old established house that he met and loved Lady Millicent Shipton Bellinger, younger daughter of the 5th Earl of Brangbolton. It was the adventure of the missing Sealyham that brought the young couple together. From the purely professional standpoint, my nephew has never ranked this among his greatest triumphs of ratiocination, but considering what it led to, he might as well, I think, be justified in regarding it as the most important case of his career. What happened was that he met the animals straying in the park, deduced from the name and address on its collar that it belonged to Lady Millicent Shipton Bellinger of 18A Upper Brook Street, and took it thither at the conclusion of his stroll and restored it. Child's play is the phrase which, if you happen to allude to it, Adrian Mulliner will always airily dismiss this particular investigation. But Lady Millicent could not have displayed more admiration and enthusiasm had it been the supremest masterpiece of detective work. She fawned on my nephew. She invited him in to tea consisting of buttered toast, anchovy sandwiches, and 2 kinds of cake. And at the conclusion of the meal they parted on terms which, even at that early stage in their acquaintance, were something warmer than those of mere friendship. Indeed, it is my belief that the girl fell in love with Adrian as instantaneously as he with her. On him, it was her radiant blonde beauty that exercised the spell. She, on her side, was fascinated, I fancy, not only by the regularity of his features, which, as is the case with all Mulliners, was considerable, but also by the fact that he was dark and thin and wore an air of inscrutable melancholy. This, as a matter of fact, was due to the troublesome attacks of dyspepsia from which he had suffered since boyhood, but to the girl it naturally seemed evidence of a great and romantic soul. Nobody, she felt, could look so grave and sad had he not hidden depths in him. One can see the thing from her point of view. All her life she had been accustomed to brainless juveniles who eked out their meager eyesight with monocles, and as far as conversation was concerned, were a spent force that, after they had asked her if she had seen the Academy, or did she think she would prefer a glass of lemonade, the effect on her of a dark, keen-eyed man like Adrian Mulliner, who spoke well and easily of footprints, psychology, and the underworld, must have been stupendous. At any rate, their love ripened rapidly. It could not have been 2 weeks after their first meeting when Adrian, as he was giving her lunch one day at the Senior Bloodstain, the Detectives Club on Rupert Street, proposed and was accepted. And for the next 24 hours, one is safe in saying there was in the whole of London, including the outlying suburban districts, no happier investigator than he. Next day, however, when he again met Millicent for lunch, he was disturbed to perceive on her beautiful face an emotion which his trained eye immediately recognized as anguish. "Oh, Adrian," said the girl brokenly, "the worst has happened. My father refuses to hear of our marrying. When I told him we were engaged, he said, 'Pooh,' quite a number of times, and added that he had never heard such dashed nonsense in his life. You see, ever since my Uncle Joe's trouble in 1928, Father has had a horror of detectives. I don't think I have met your Uncle Joe. You will have the opportunity next year. With the usual allowance for good conduct, he should be with us again about July. And there is another thing." "Not another?" "Yes. Do you know Sir Jasper Addleton, OBE, the financier? Father wants me to marry him. Isn't that awful?" "I have certainly heard more enjoyable bits of news," agreed Adrian. "This wants a good deal of careful thinking over." The process of thinking over his unfortunate situation had the effect of rendering excessively acute the pangs of Adrian Mulliner's dyspepsia. During the past 2 weeks, the ecstasy of being with Millicent and deducing that she loved him had caused a complete cessation of the attacks. But now they began again, worse than ever. At length, after a sleepless night, during which he experienced all of the emotions of one who has carelessly swallowed a family of scorpions, he sought a specialist. The specialist was one of those keen modern minds who disdain the outworn formula of the more conservative mass of the medical profession. He examined Adrian carefully, then sat back in his chair with the tips of his fingertips touching. "Smile," he said. "Eh?" said Adrian. Smile, Mr. Mulliner. Did you say smile? That's it, smile. But, Adrian pointed out, I just lost the only girl I've ever loved. Well, that's fine, said the specialist, who was a bachelor. Come on now, if you please, start smiling. Adrian was a little bewildered. Listen, he said, what is all this about smiling? We started, if I recollect, talking about my gastric juices. Now, in some mysterious way, we seem to have got on to the subject of smiles. How do you mean, smile? I never smile. I haven't smiled since the butler tripped over the spaniel and upset the melted butter on my Aunt Elizabeth when I was a boy of 12. The specialist nodded. Precisely. And that is why your digestive organs trouble you. Dyspepsia, he proceeded, is now recognized by the progressive element of the profession as purely mental. We do not treat it with drugs and medicines. Happiness is the only cure. Be gay, Mr. Mulliner, be cheerful, and if you can't do that, at any rate, smile. The mere exercise of the risible muscles is in itself beneficial. Go out now and make a point, whenever you have a spare moment, of smiling. Like this, said Adrian. Wider than that. How about this? Better, said the specialist, but still not quite so elastic as one could desire, and naturally you need practice. We must expect the muscles to work rustily for a while at their unaccustomed task. No doubt things will brighten by and by. He regarded Adrian thoughtfully. Odd, he said. A curious smile, yours, Mr. Mulliner. It reminds me a little of the Mona Lisa's. It has the same underlying tone of the sardonic and the sinister. It virtually amounts to a leer. Somehow it seems to convey the suggestion that you know all. Fortunately, my own life is an open book for all to read, and so I was not discommoded. But I think it would be better if, for the present, you endeavored not to smile at invalids or nervous persons. Good morning, Mr. Mulliner. That will be 5 guineas precisely. So, I won't take too much time, but we have the start of our story, The Smile That Wins. And I shall be back for this amazing, the Great Wodehouse Readathon. Have a great one, guys, and we'll be talking books soon. Bye.